Welcome to Knife Thoughts. This EDC, or everything that doesn't cut video, is going to be on these pens. And really it's going to be a comparison review of these three different pens from Tactile Turn. And so the real reason why I'm doing this video is because I have, for a while, for the last year or so, been really kind of leaning into wanting nice USA made tools. I've always appreciated things being made in the USA, but I've kind of leaned more into it recently, and I've also always appreciated pens and notebooks and have journaled throughout my life and things like that. But recently I decided I wanted to get a nice USA made bolt action pen, and I think the kind of natural first place to look for that is Tactile Turn. They're pretty well known in the pen community. Now they're also making knives and known in the knife community and just known in the EDC community in general. So I purchased this pen, and this is the Tactile Turn standard length slim width bolt action in titanium, and really liked it. But I was really interested in maybe checking out the different sizes, the different lengths, and I went online and couldn't really find a good comparison of all three of their lengths. I saw some videos of comparing two different ones or different mechanisms, but didn't really see a comparison between the different lengths. And I reached out to Tactile Turn, and Will of Tactile Turn responded that he'd be happy to send not just one size, but both of the other sizes for review and comparison. And so I want to say a huge thank you to Will and to Tactile Turn for the opportunity. I've actually had these pens for a while now. I've had some issues with my filming setup and the radon pump breaking in my basement where I film and such, but finally got it moved and am making a video here. So I have had these for a while and have gotten the chance to really thoroughly use them, check them out, not just use them at home, but carry them and have a really good feel for my thoughts on these pens, and also in the kind of differences between the different sizes and materials. So it will be a comparison of the lengths. The widths, although I only have two of Tactile Turn's widths, they do also have a thick model that I don't have one of yet, and also the materials. I have three of the different materials they use. So just as a kind of, introduction to Tactile Turn, if you're not familiar, these pens are made entirely in the USA. They are designed, machined, and assembled in Texas at Tactile Turn. And these are the bolt action mechanism. So if you're not familiar with that, it goes like so, just like a bolt action on a rifle or similar to that. And when you catch it in that forward area, the pen is actuated, ready to write, and then you can kick it out of there and it's ready to store or carry. And so these are all the bolt actions. There is also other mechanisms that Tactile Turn does. They have a click mechanism that they call their side click, and then they have a switch mechanism. And those are both really interesting to me, but I haven't gotten a chance to check them out yet. Now, at first, when I first got this one, I was somewhat concerned because of kind of the fact that it's not a super large upturn here, that this would disengage accidentally. And I have had that happen no times. Absolutely no issues with that. And really it makes sense when you're writing. There's no reason that it would really hit that in any real way. You'd have to really be twisting it. So that has not happened at all. In fact, the opposite has happened. I have had them actuate in the pocket a couple times, but no real issue there. Certainly no issue with it accidentally disengaging. And one quick comparison here is that there is certainly more of an upturn in the standard width, the normal width, versus the slim. So that is something to be aware of there in the differences. Now, with this bolt action, these are very, very fidget friendly. And so, of course, there are going to be people who say, oh, it's a tool, it's not for fidgeting or whatever. But that is one of the values of these things that we carry. I mean, it just is. If you're like me, you carry a knife and get a lot of enjoyment out of opening and closing it. And so it is definitely a factor that they are enjoyable, tactile get it to open and close. My knife is kind of dirty, as you probably could see, but that's because it's a user. But the thing is with knives, which, again, this is Knife Thoughts. I love knives and I carry knives all the time, but even in my life, there are times where it's not super appropriate to whip out your knife and, flip it open. I work in a martial arts school, and even there, if I was working at the front desk and just flipping a knife out, it's not necessarily the most socially appropriate thing. Then another thing is, honestly, sometimes I feel like doing it when I'm driving. I drive a good amount, and that is just not safe. So having these, it makes a noise, so I'm not sure everybody would love the noise, but it is certainly not as scary as flipping a knife out, and safer, especially if you're in the car. So I do really appreciate the fidget factor of it. And then one other thing with the construction is that these have the kind of namesake tactile turn finish. And so it's really difficult to show. In fact, when I was watching different kind of reviews and comparisons, that's something that a couple people mentioned, including Nick Shabazz. I noticed really kind of made a point of that, is that this finish is difficult to see, but easy to feel. Like, in fact, you can easily hear it. But it's not super easy to see. When you get this in hand, the finish is really nice. You can see why people really do enjoy these tactile turn pens, and actually some of their knives also have this finish, but because it is just a really nice finish. And basically what it is very small rings around the body of the pen, and it's very well done. Hopefully this is focusing correctly, but you actually can't see at all on the titanium model. I don't think you can on the bronze model. You can on the copper. I'll talk about the copper material more later, but you can't really see the seam. So there's where it screws, and it's machined so nicely that it really disappears there. So it's very well done. The machining is certainly really, really nice on these, and it feels good. Every now and then I'll feel like maybe because it is circles around the pen body that my fingers will slip just a little bit, but I think more so on the standard thickness. But really it just feels good. You do get a good amount of grip forward and back, so you're not going to be like slipping down the pen. If you start here, you're not going to slip down to right at the tip, which is an issue for me with a lot of typical pens. So for example, something like a Bic click stick. This is a PrivaGuard version, but the click stick, or even the classic round stick, my fingers will slip down towards the tip when writing, and that's not going to happen with this finish. Now, moving into the comparison, and just a note, this is probably going to be a relatively long video. I have a good amount of notes for this video, so buckle in. So the first comparison that I want to make is the length. So there are basically 3 different lengths that Tactile Turn offers, and you've got the standard, the short, and the mini. And so they are definitely different lengths, and that's really the first thing that I was interested in when I was interested in checking out the different sizes, is the different lengths. And the reason for that is because when I got this standard, it did feel a little bit long in my pocket. Like when I was actually walking and moving, it would kind of jab into my leg. And so I was interested in these other sizes. And you can see there is a good bit of difference. There's about like a half an inch, maybe slightly more, between each of the models. And so, why is that? What allows that? Well, basically they have different refills. So this standard length, it comes with a G2. So that's a Pilot G2, which is a really common gel refill, and it's a nice refill. It's one that I used actually some in high school and college a lot. And so if you're not familiar, that is this. So this is the Pilot G2. It's a well-loved pen in general, and you can see that the standard length is just shorter than the actual Pilot G2. But that also can use, several other refills. In fact, one of the refills that it can use that I really like is the Uniball 1. So this is a nice, really dark refill that you can fit in without any modifications, in my experience, that I don't actually think is on the list of compatible refills that Tactile Turn has. So if you like Uniball 1, it should fit in the standard. Now, the next size, the short, is about 5 inches, and it is a Parker size refill. So it comes with a Schmidt 9000. Sometimes I have trouble unscrewing this bronze one. I think I maybe could put a little bit of oil on it, but I don't have the actual. An interesting thing here, when I do unscrew this, it seems like it slices into my finger a little bit. So it's got some real precise machining, but this has a Parker size refill. It's actually a Schmidt 9000. So you can see that. Easy Flow 9000. But this Parker size is actually, there's a lot of refills that will fit in it. So, you should be able to find one that it looks like this area here is where it was kind of slicing into my finger. But there's a lot of refills that are this Parker size. A lot of people like the Quink Flow, Q-Ink Flow. I'm not sure how it's pronounced. I just don't have the actual pen to show to compare for you. But another thing that will fit in this Parker size is a Fisher Space Pen refill. Now, they fit with the adapter that the refills come with. Fisher Space Pen pressurized refills come with an adapter that allows them to fit in Parker size pens. I don't have one with an adapter. I have several different pens that use Fisher Space Pen refills, but I don't have one with an adapter, so I can't show it to you. I plan to get one soon, but haven't gotten it yet. But anyway, I really like Fisher Space Pen refills. It's something, I don't know why I think I was letting my son use this pen, so that's why there's a little bit of grease on it, but it's something that I really like. I use them a lot. I use them really all throughout college, and they're not, I guess, the smoothest writing or the best refills in any kind of way, but I really like them. I'm used to them, and they can write in any circumstances. Like I'll sometimes be writing with the pen upside down because I'm reading and writing in the book, something like that. So I do appreciate that. And I think generally I would probably get Fisher Space Pen refills for this Parker size. So that's something to be aware of there. And I like this length. So it's like I say, it's about 5 inches. So, for example, it can fit in an EDC pouch a lot better than the basically 5.5 inch standard length. It fits in a Viperade VE1P, which I have been using and actually just put away, but it fits in a Viperade VE1P, which is a pretty common EDC pouch, and can fit in your pocket really nicely. I like this size in general for carry and use. It certainly is long enough for me, as you can see, but of course, so is the standard. The standard is longer than it needs to be for me. So then moving on to the smallest size here, this is the Mini. And so the Mini is in the Pilot G2 Mini size refill. So if I unscrew this one here, you can see this is a very small refill, and this is not the one that came with it. I got a little pack of different colors of these refills, and so it's a very small refill, and it's one that really there's not anything else that I'm aware of or that it seems Tactile Turn suggests other than the Pilot G2 Mini. So you're kind of restricted to that particular refill. And not only that, but you actually it doesn't seem like you can purchase those on their own. You can only purchase the pens themselves. So it's something that I don't really love about that, because I don't like having to buy the pens and throw away the plastic bodies. It's, it's not a huge cost thing. They're not really expensive pens to buy, even if you're buying the actual pens and just using the refills. It's just kind of like the principle of just throwing away a bunch of plastic. I don't really love that. And it's kind of unfortunate, because I do really like this size. This size to me is long enough. If you hold it towards the end there, if you hold it a little higher, it can get to be a little bit short. But I think that it is generally long enough for writing. Maybe not like extended writing for me, but general writing, I think that it is long enough. It's just that I don't love that Pilot G2 Mini is the only refill option, at least seemingly. Now, one thing I want to mention with this also is that it did leak. So the refill that came with this did leak, but I don't really blame it at all, because first of all, I looked it up and it seems like G2s leak sometimes, particularly when they are in changing temperature and things like that, or you're putting too much pressure on them. And so the truth is, this one I carried in my pocket when it was really, really cold outside. So I'd carry it out in the cold and then, come inside and it would get warm. So it had big temperature changes, but also my son really likes drawing with this one. And I don't know if you have ever watched a 2.5-year-old draw, but they don't use a very light hand. So, it did get a lot of pressure used on it. But it did leak. I cleaned it by taking Q-tips and some alcohol and just kind of cleaning out in there. You can probably see a little bit left in there, but I got it cleaned out enough that it's not leaving any residue on this new refill that I can tell. So it did work out, but just something to be aware of, that the Pilot G2s can leak. So I like all of the sizes. I think that they all kind of have a place. I think that these, you get a lot of ink. It is a full-size pen. It's like the size of a normal pen, right? So I'll give you some size comparisons to some more common pens. Here is, again, the Bic round stick. Here is the click stick. And so I'm actually going to move the round stick over here. Click stick. And you can see that the round stick is a little longer than the standard size, just a little bit. The click stick's right about the standard size, and a little longer than the short. Then if you go into something like a pencil, so here's a classic Bic mechanical pencil, it's going to be a lot longer. So if you carry a mechanical pencil like that, you won't have any trouble with the standard length. Here is a Bic crystal, so again, longer than any of them. If you use a Zebra F701, here is that. So you can see that it's somewhere between the standard and the short in its length. But there's not really much out there the size of the Mini. The Mini is a small pen, except for this Write in the Rain pen. So this Write in the Rain pen seems to be made by Fisher. It has a Fisher-made refill, and it is almost exactly the same size as the Mini. So it's kind of an interesting thing, because the Mini, again, only uses that Pilot G2 Mini refill, whereas this has a bolt action. It is a very different style of bolt action, as you can see, much longer. So I'm guessing that plays a factor, but this does use a normal Fisher Space Pen style refill. So it's just something to be aware of there with that, is that I really like the length of the Mini for how easy it is to carry, but I don't think that you're getting the ideal refill experience with that. So if I was to choose one of these lengths, I would choose the short. And so the short, again, uses Parker's. You can use Fisher Space Pens. It's a great size for writing. You can see that it's plenty long for my hands. My hands are pretty big pretty wide, I guess you could say. My fingers aren't that long, but my hand is wide. And then it still carries nicely. It's not massive. I actually want to show you it compared to these other kind of standard length pens here, but also compared to my Sebenza. So I could carry my Sebenza almost every day, and you can see that the short is similar in length to a large Sebenza. So that can give you an idea, if you are more of a knife person, that the short is similar in length to a large Sebenza, whereas the mini is a little shorter, maybe half an inch to an inch, and then the standard is a good bit longer. So, you know, if you're familiar with carrying a Sebenza large, you will be familiar with the size of the of the short, not the standard or the mini that I was trying to say, but the short. And I do think that the short is, again, the size that I prefer. Now, moving on to the different widths. So there's two different widths that I have represented here. Like I mentioned, there is also a thicker width. And the thicker width actually was introduced because they started doing G10 and micarta and other materials like that, non-metal materials, and needed to have them thicker. But now they also do offer the metal versions in the thicker widths. I don't really think that I would love the thicker widths because, for example, the normal width, I'll use this one, is relatively similar to a Sharpie. And I don't think that I would want to go too much thicker than a Sharpie. So if you're familiar with Sharpies, which I think a lot of people are, then you'll be kind of familiar with the thickness of the regular width. The regular width is probably slightly less thick than a Sharpie at the Sharpie's thickest. I'm not a specs channel. If you watch the channel, you know that. You can look up the specs, but it's similar. Now, on the other hand, the slim is pretty slim. It actually is more similar to one of those kind of more standard pen widths. So you can see that it's very similar to the round stick, similar to the crystal, maybe a little bit wider than the crystal, things like that. It's very similar to your standard kind of cheap Bic style pens. And so that's really what I'm most used to recently. And so I do prefer this slim thickness for the width of the pen. I think that it feels good in the hand. I don't, get fatigue in my hand with it. So between the two sizes that I have seen, I prefer the slim. Now there is a difference aside from just the thickness that comes with the different widths, and that is the clips. So as you can see, the two standard thicknesses, standard widths, come with a bent clip, whereas the slim comes with a machined clip. And it's kind of an interesting thing because the kind of prevailing, sentiment in knives at least is in favor of machine clips. There's a lot of people who really prefer machine clips. I mean, for example, people buy $60+ machine clips for on their $500 Sebenzas. But even with knives, I often prefer bent clips. I do prefer the standard clip for the Sebenza and for a lot of different knives. And that actually is the case here on these also. Now, the funny thing is that it seems like kind of the prevailing sentiment is actually in favor of the bent clips for these pens. Now, that said, I think that the machine clip looks really nice. It's a nice, simple machined clip. It just seems like the bent clip, one, almost looks like it fits better. Now, it doesn't necessarily fit the aesthetic of these other materials as much, which again, I'll talk about the materials later, but it does fit the kind of overall look. And I'll say I've seen some people talk about the clip not matching the metal. I believe it was Nick Shabazz actually that I saw say that. I actually like it because the clip and the bolt action, the actual handle do match each other. And so I like the look of that. I don't mind that the clip is a different color. But I like mostly I prefer the practical side of this clip better. So it's easier to put into your pocket. So you can even see it on something like this sticker here. Slides right on, but it holds it on nicely. I haven't had any issues of them just falling out of the pocket. Whereas with this kind of steep turn towards that kind of hard corner there, it's just a little harder to get in and out of the pocket. So it's not a huge deal. Again, I think the main thing is, first of all, the actual width. Like if you're trying to decide between the different widths, it's the main thing you should be considering is the widths themselves and what you like to write with, the feel of what you like to write with. But another factor is the clips, and I think really the biggest thing is like, do you have a strong preference of the looks? And if not, then I think that the bent clips do work a little bit better, but it's not a huge difference. Of course, the other thing with carry, for specifically in an EDC pouch, the slim also carries better in an EDC pouch. The standard size is closer to your typical AAA size flashlight. So if you're already carrying a AAA size flashlight in your pouch, these will fit right in. But of course, the slim is slimmer. So I do think overall I prefer the slim thickness. I am interested in trying the thick, but I don't think I'll prefer it. And I think really I lean towards the thin or the slim. Now, one other thing here that I really was interested in comparing is the different materials. So I purchased this one in titanium, and really the idea was to match some of my other stuff that I carry. Again, I carry my plain Jane 31 Sebenza most days, so to have a nice titanium pen. But I wanted to, when Will offered to send these for review, I wanted to get the opportunity to also compare the different materials. So this is titanium again, this is bronze, and this is copper. Now, first of all, these ones are going to patina. You can probably tell, and you can actually see it in the difference in how these look versus on Tactile Turn's website, but also you can see it pretty clearly in the difference between the tip of the bronze, where I don't touch much, and then here where I do touch a lot. And there's a pretty big difference. Now the copper, actually the whole thing just patinas because it's just out in the air. So this tip is closer to what the whole thing looked like, but it looked very shiny, kind of similar to this, and just the whole thing patinas, and you can even see that in here along the bolt. So really, I think the first thing to be aware of is that the bronze and the copper will patina. They're not going to look forever how they look when you get it. They do come in a vacuum sealed, packaging so that you get it without patina, but it will develop patina. The titanium, on the other hand, is going to stay pretty much just like it is. It does not patina. It's very corrosion resistant, of course, and that kind of gets into the other difference between the materials for me, which is actually the toughness or the resistance to wear. So copper is much softer than the other two here, than bronze and titanium. So, for example, the titanium there's a hardness scale called the Brinell hardness. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but for example, titanium is about 330, whereas bronze is like 170 to 200, and then when you go to copper, it's much less. It's like, let's see, where do I have it written? I'm trying to see. I think I forgot to write it down, but it's less than 100. So the copper is significantly less hard than the others. In fact, I believe it's closer to like 70 maybe of the hardness. So copper is a lot softer, and of course you probably know that if you've ever worked with copper. It's a soft metal. But you actually can see it in use. Like you can see the effects of that. So for example, if you can see, boy, it's tough to see the finish here. But if you can see right here, there's actually some lines that go diagonal to the rest of the finish, and actually some here. There's a little kind of gouge here, and some of those lines here. Yeah, you can see it kind of right there and right there. And those, I believe, are mostly from actually carrying this next to these other two pens. So just the pressure in a pocket or in my pouch that I have my pens in of carrying them next to each other caused those deformations. So it will show wear, and some people love that. Some people really like seeing the wear, from carrying and using their tools. Some people might not. I like both kind of ways, but I do think that the copper is a little softer than I prefer, less because of that wear, but more because I developed some play in the clip. It started to kind of wiggle back and forth, and how these work with the clips, with the bent clips, is that this top part unscrews. Again, the bronze is really hard to unscrew, so I'm not going to unscrew it, but it unscrews, and that's how you can take the bolt out. You can actually take it out the other way also, I believe, but that holds the clip in place. And so I screwed that back down to try to make sure that it was tight and everything, and it still had that play, and I realized that it had actually deformed the metal itself on either side of the clip just from carrying and moving back and forth. And so I reached out, and Will said that does happen every now and then. Not a lot, they said, pretty rarely, but I think I was probably being pretty rough on it, carrying it, and so every now and then I'll have to show somebody a technique. I work in a martial arts school with my normal clothes on and stuff, and again, my son, I was allowing to use it. So I do think I was relatively rough on it, but it did deform the actual metal, and it sounds like that can happen. Now, I actually fixed it by putting some super glue in there and just screwing it down real hard and gluing it. You don't need to get into here. You can take the bolt out this way and such, because it does unscrew. So it is fixed. It's not a huge, issue or anything like that, but just something that, I wanted to share. And of course, they said when that happens, they are happy to replace it. They actually asked if I wanted a replacement, but, I wanted to show this and show it off and give you the full details and everything. So I haven't gotten a replacement or anything at this point, but I believe that they stand behind their products fully. They make them in-house. Will is the owner, I believe, of the company, or one of the partners, and really runs it, and seems to respond to their customer service messages, emails. So I really think that they stand behind them, and if you have an issue like that, just reach out. I'm sure they will fix it up. So between the different materials, again, bronze is significantly harder or tougher than the copper, but not as much as the titanium. I didn't, though, have any kind of issues with marring or anything like that. Even scratches, I haven't noticed any major scratches on the bronze. So I think if you want patina but don't want those scratches and such, then the bronze is the way to go. If you don't want scratches and don't want patina, then the titanium is the way to go. And if you want scratches and patina, then copper is the way to go. The other difference, of course, is the weight, and it's kind of the same thing. The copper is very heavy, titanium is very light, bronze is heavy, so you can kind of get a mix of them with the bronze, whereas if you want heavy, copper, and if you want light, titanium. Now, which of these materials do I personally prefer? Well, I think I lean towards the titanium. Firstly, like I say, it matches the other stuff that I have. Secondly, I do like that it's going to stay as it is. I am a big fan of traditional knives, of traditional slip joints, and most people in that community seem to love carbon steel 1095 for the fact that patinas. I prefer stainless steel. I like the blades to stay the way that they look when I get them. So I do think that I prefer the titanium. It's nice and lightweight. You really, with this one, it kind of disappears in your pocket until maybe you bend your leg too much and you feel it kind of stick into your leg because of the length. But it's very, very lightweight. And I think overall, I'm very impressed by these pens. I have really, because of these pens, gone into a little bit of a rabbit hole of machined pens. So for example, there's a Reddit, or a subreddit on Reddit called Machined Pens, and they have a thread or what do they call it on Reddit? I think Reddit. They call it threads on Reddit, I believe. But anyway, of machined pens, USA made machined pens. And so I've gotten a couple others. So here is one from the Right Choice Paint Company. Interesting name, but another titanium. This one's actually an Energel sized. So Energel are slightly longer than Pilot G2s, if I understand correctly, but it's actually a little shorter than the Tactile Turn in the Pilot G2. And then this is from Honey Badger Arsenal, and a little different in its mechanism somewhat, but this is a Parker sized, and again, it is a little shorter than the Tactile Turn Parker sized. So just a size comparison with some different machine pens. I also had the Right in the Rain bolt action metal pen and seem to have lost it, unfortunately. So I wanted to show that to you, but don't have the opportunity. It would be a nice comparison to the fact that I kind of highlighted that this pen holds a Fisher Space Pen refill, because the metal version also holds a Fisher Space Pen refill and is about the size of the standard Tactile Turn. So Right in the Rain is able to make a very small pen with a Fisher Space Pen refill and also a very long pen. So just some different comparisons of different sized machine pens. And I think Tactile Turn really offers a very refined look for the price range. Now, just like knives, I was kind of blown away by how high you can go in the high end of these things. These are on kind of towards the lower end of USA made machine pens. These are both in the $60 range. This one's being aluminum and this one being titanium. The Tactile Turn are all in the $100 to $120 range, depending on whether you get the standard or the slim. And also, there are more expensive versions. So they do seasonal releases and they do a zirconium version. So of course there are more expensive Tactile Turns, but these are $100 to $120. There are pens out there that are $150, $200, $300. So you can definitely go higher up in the price range, but I think you get a really, really refined, nice product with just like super nice machining, great action. Again, very, very tactile, very enjoyable. And again, made 100% in the USA. I believe that they stand behind their products, and just overall a nice, refined, very well-made pen for the price. I think it does offer a good value, and honestly, I have been having to hold myself back from buying several of their other models. I'm really interested in the click, the side click, and the switch, as well as, again, the slim in maybe the Parker size, the short, or also I've been interested in checking out one of the thicker ones. So I have really gone into a rabbit hole here with the machined pens, and so I want to say thank you to Will at Tactile Turn for giving me the opportunity to make this video. I will also have an article comparing the different sizes, as well as kind of a recommendation article on some different USA made machined pens. So make sure that you subscribe to the channel, click the bell, and select all so you know when I post new videos. Go to my website, knifethoughts.com, where I post articles on knives and EDC related topics like this. I will have more pen reviews coming soon, as well as always more knife videos, but more pen reviews coming both to my YouTube here and to my website.
And last but not least, as always, don't forget to go out and do good.